When you just start tuning in, your subconscious mind starts to go in that direction, and you don't have to do it through your conscious mind. When you have to do things through your conscious mind, it's a lot more effort,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a lot more control, and control is exhausting for human beings.
Hello, so today I'm joined for the second time by Nidhi, an Ayurvedic practitioner and teacher. And in this conversation, we went even deeper than the last one. We're getting into the 6 part daily rhythm Ayurveda has mapped out for the human body for thousands of years now. Why a cold smoothie breakfast can actually decrease your digestion before the day even starts. That's really interesting about the heat of food. And why so many of us are waking up hot and dry, specifically at 3 a.m. And also why chasing more information, more supplements, more doing is often working against our hormones instead of with them. So if you've ever felt like you know exactly what to do for your health, but your body isn't really responding, this is the missing piece. I absolutely fell in love with all the practices she spoke about. I hope you absolutely love this episode. Hello, today I am very lucky to be joined again for the second episode with Nidhi, an Ayurvedic practitioner and teacher who specialises in helping people use traditional Ayurvedic principles to support hormone health, digestion, sleep, and overall balance. The last conversation we had really stuck with me, and I've done a lot of the principles we spoke about, even like the almond oil on the body, and lots of other areas of eating, especially the practices of saying, the light, warm breakfast in the morning and the more nutrient dense lunch. And the more I thought about what we spoke about in the last conversation, the more I understood how much rhythm comes into all this and how modern life pulls women out of that. And what I do see very often is women who know a lot about nutrition and health, but the body still doesn't respond the way they would expect. So, from your perspective, what's happening? Because I think for me, I'm understanding that we're very high with knowledge now and understanding of what to do, but it's like we're missing this piece that allows then things to work. And for me, it's all about the nervous system. But from an Ayurvedic perspective, what do you see as that missing link?
Yeah. So, Becca, 100% the nervous system is a big aspect of it for sure. But, like you said, the rhythm. So, I want to go back to this understanding of rhythm, right? So, when you look at the universe outside, you see everything happens in a rhythm. Like whether you're looking at the rotation of the earth, the revolution, you're looking at the vibration of a cell, even our own breath, right? You understand, right? If you and I were going and we were stuck in severe traffic and we had to get somewhere, what would happen to our breath? It would change its rhythm.
Shallow.
Yeah, it'll become shallow. It'll become uneven. When you're watching a movie that's very scary or you're facing a situation with high fear, you'll see your heartbeat, the rhythm changes. Even when we understand that everything in life happens in rhythms, and when something goes off balance, then the rhythm goes off balance. And I always use the example of global climate change. And when we see crazy weather patterns, and if you see, I live in New York, and if you were to see that it starts to snow in the month of April, which is spring, you inherently know that something is drastically wrong. And people start to get worried. It's not that they're really concerned about the snow one day, but they understand that that snow in the spring is going to spoil the crop. It's going to spoil the ecosystem. The mosquitoes are not going to come out, and the bats are going to die, and it's going to create this whole spiral in the universe, right? Again, it's a rhythm. So the way I like to put it, Becca, and really that's the science of Ayurveda. It's the science of the rhythms of life. And the way I like to put it is like this entire world works like a beautiful, perfect orchestra. Think about it like people playing multiple instruments, all of this happening. But even if one thing goes out of rhythm, one thing goes out of beat, that music becomes noise. Now, it's very similar in our own body. There are rhythms in our body that we must honor. And I just want to give you examples of that rhythm, right? So, of course, your breath is a rhythm. But one of the rhythms where our action comes into place is our circadian rhythm. And it's not just day and night, it's actually 6 different parts of the day. And I always talk about that. So, we want to understand that when we go off rhythm, when we don't understand these 6 parts of the day, and we live in a manner where we're out of rhythm, what happens as a result is our digestion goes off, which is also a rhythm. Our hormones go off, which is a massive rhythm for women's health. Our nervous system goes off. The way we rest and repair goes off. So every single rhythm will follow. And one of the macro rhythms to follow for us as human beings is we start at the circadian rhythm. And when I say circadian rhythm, it's not like, let me rise with the sun and sleep with the sun. It's way beyond that. It's what do you do in each of these different parts of the day. But really understanding that and noticing, right, how each and every species on the planet understands their rhythms. Like a deer will never get carried away and say, "Oh, I'm just going to stay up tonight and just stargaze." Not going to do it. It's diurnal. It's going to wake up in the morning. And neither is it discipline. We think that just living in our rhythms is discipline. I mean, imagine if all the species felt like that. The earth would be in chaos. Our planet, it's anyways in chaos for different reasons, man made reasons. But imagine if the animals went into that chaos. And bears know exactly when to hibernate. And the groundhog knows exactly when to come back when it's the first day of fall. I mean, can you imagine the precision of how the rooster can crew, like, can come out every morning for his cockadoodle do? So that's the rhythm that we've forgotten as human beings.
That's a very good perspective to look at it like that. It's actually so difficult to live out of rhythm because all of the things that happen downstream. And it really makes you think when you look at nature, even like when the bees, if the honey and the bees stop operating properly, everything falls apart. It's like that with our bodies. If it's like one piece out of rhythm, there's this cascade of events that, and it's like hormones are like dominoes. When one is off, others are off as well.
Oh
So
my God.
I just love thinking of it like that because it's really understanding that you're plugging pieces in really hard that are extremely important, like the nutrition, the sleep, and all these pieces of the health puzzle. But when one isn't in place and one thing you're doing out of rhythm, be that nervous system dysregulation, be it's you're just not getting optimal good quality sleep, that one thing then sends everything else into chaos. So I think that's an amazing way to look at it.
Yeah, and Rebecca, like a couple of ways that I personally tell my clients to go about this. I say two things, right? I say you just start at looking at the clock. Like there's the 6 parts of the day, and if you want, we can go into it. It's super easy. And you start like just really tuning into those 6 parts and seeing what's happening outside, right? So when you start doing that, you automatically are learning through your subconscious. Like I said, right? Deer don't even need alarm clock, right? Like they wake up in the morning and they know what to do. And so does every other species. But when you just start tuning in, your subconscious mind starts to go in that direction, and you don't have to do it through your conscious mind. When you have to do things through your conscious mind, it's a lot more effort,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a lot more control, and control is exhausting for human beings. The other thing that I say is look, just watch nature. If you're living in a city like I am, watch National Geographic. When you all of that doom scrolling we do, let's just watch National Geographic and look at the behavior of other animals. And believe me, even just looking at the behavior of other animals in a very subtle way, right, very indirect way, reminds us of our own behaviors that we're meant to be in. And I think it's just that it's being in awe. Learning through awe is learning in a different part of your brain. All of my programs, I never, I'm like, if it feels like information, don't take it. If you make a connect, if you cannot say, "Ah, now I get it,"
Yeah.
you can say that to a health principle you hear. "Ah, this makes sense." Your body has internalized it. Your cellular memory has been activated, and it's already been taken.
It's exactly like what you said in the previous podcast with logically doing intermittent fasting for the female body and how you spoke about the principle of, eating lighter and warm food in the morning because of how digestion is in the morning and eating the more nutrient dense lunch. And it's like understanding if we fully understand the body, it's quite intuitive. So it's not like me really saying, oh, I have to eat my breakfast now. I have to do things at this time, but it's what's naturally works for the body. But going back to that 6 parts of the day, I really like how you explain that. And your book is a wealth of knowledge when you're really trying to understand the principles and putting everything together. But I think the 6 parts is a really nice place to just very briefly touch on because it makes everything so obvious almost.
Oh my God, exactly, right? Okay, so we're going to do this very quickly. So, Rebecca, one of the principles that we're really following and leading with is as is the macro, such is the micro. Right? And that's something that all philosophers over time have held. But I say, don't believe me. Let's go over it and do it together. So when I say as the world is outside, such is the world inside. Now, being diurnal mammals, which means that we are very connected to the cycle of the sun in our wake hours because we are diurnal, which means we don't have nighttime vision. If we didn't have electricity, we would not be able to see anything in the dark. All right. So now let's start in the morning, early morning hours when you first wake up, around 6 to 10. Let's say sunrise is at 6. If you were to walk on grass, how would barefoot on grass, how would that feel, Rebecca?
Very grounding, wake you up.
Yeah, but how is the grass going to be? Is it going to be wet?
Oh,
Is it going
yeah.
to be
Like we go back to the word moist again.
Yeah, it's going to be wet and damp and cold in the morning. And
Yes.
that's exactly, so that's the macro. Our body is no different. In the morning, our body is wet and sluggish. Don't believe me? I'm going to give you evidence. People who are prone to nasal congestion, they have more nasal congestion in the morning and they have eye boogers. And if you had to go and show off in a yoga class in the morning, you can't because your joints are still, they're still cold and they're padded. And there's just as the earth is soggy, the body is soggy. Now, in that soggy body, the last thing you want to do is put a cold breakfast. So, really cold yogurt from the refrigerator, a cold smoothie, a cold protein shake, cold fruit. It's going to add to the sog. And you don't want to do that because you're working your way towards a higher sun. Like you want the day to be activated and you want your body to be activated. Any of those foods will make you feel like, oh, I'm not even hungry. I had a smoothie. I'm not even hungry till noon. Yes, you won't be hungry because your digestive fire has been killed now. So ideally, the first thing to do in the morning when you wake up, you can have a small cup of a warm beverage, not excess water, exercise, eat a small, light, warm breakfast. Breakfast is not the biggest meal of the day. That's a very recent 1900s concept when industrialization began, and a nutritionist said, you eat heavy so you can work longer hours and you don't need to break for lunch. Not true. Our bodies need a warm, light breakfast. Your digestive enzymes are not even fully kicked in the morning. So you exercise, you warm up your body, you eat a warm breakfast, small, great, you're set for the day. Between 10 and 2, Rebecca, what's happening to the sun outside?
Rising.
It's rising. So is the heat in your body, your mental focus, your ability to do collaborative work without really getting frustrated. But then also, as you get closer to noon, your digestive fire rises. Science today knows this. Gastrin rises. Your insulin sensitivity is its best, which means you can break down starches easily and you can break down your foods easily. So that's the time your body is fully warmed up. Even plants cannot dare do photosynthesis without the power of the sun. So the sun drastically changes our biochemistry in our body. So get all your collaborative, really busy work done between 10 and 2. All offices in the world are busiest during these hours. And make sure you get a nice big lunch. That is the time to indulge because your body is the most forgiving. Now, Rebecca, imagine yourself at a desk right now. The sun is between 2 and 6 as the sun is setting. Around 4 o'clock, how do most people feel at their desks? Around
Tired.
3. They're like stretching, yawning, right? Because as the wind sets outside, when the sun sets, the experience of wind on the planet is enhanced. Wind outside, wind in our body. And when that wind in our body, nobody really wants to nap at 4 o'clock. Nobody's napping at 4, but you still feel this kind of lull. That is your reminder. In our body, our neurotransmitters are changing. They go through a transition from 4 to 6, where what we call excitatory mediators that keep you awake in the day are phasing out into nighttime mediators, which are called inhibitory mediators. And so the transition is happening during that time. So it's your signal not to get caffeine, but yes, it's your signal to say, I'm going to do my lightest work. Ideally, you want to shut shop and go, but I know that's not possible in the modern day. So you want to reserve your lightest work between 4 and 6 so that you can really shut shop at 6. And you want to play with the waves, you want to swim with the tide, not against it. You can get a peppermint tea. You can stretch your body. You can rotate your joints. You can get some fresh air. And then you want to surrender to this evening at 6 o'clock, right? Assuming that we are looking at 12-hour days and 12-hour nights, around 6:30 as the sun begins to set, right? And if you tune in, if you're living in a place where you can hear birds, you see there's a set of birds that make their way back home. And you can hear it's a very different chirp in the evening. The morning chirp is very different. It's very active. The evening chirp is like a distant, soft, like going home grounding chirp. 6 o'clock is when the sun sets. Your digestion works no more. Before we invented electricity and electrified our homes in the 1930s. That's so recent, like not even 100 years ago. We were not eating these late dinners. Dinner was a supper. You had a supper, you had, or like really bone broths, stews, and stone pots. Once in a while, full moon feasts would happen, right? Families would get together, full moon, you would have a feast, have a bonfire, but otherwise, that's it. Light, small dinner at 6. And if we can do that and then move on to sleep, get into bed between 6 and 10 is introspection. No loud, no loud arguments, nothing crazy. Do not stimulate yourself as far as possible. Let your body slow down. And then by 10 o'clock, ideally, we want to be in bed. Again, staying up late is a very new thing to human beings because really, we were not like, oh, I'm a night owl and I'm going to just sit with my oil lamp looking at the stars. Nobody did that for 6 hours, before we had electricity. And so 10 o'clock, you want to be in bed because science today knows, and Ayurveda identified this 5,000 years ago, that between 10 and 2, your body goes into magical repair, right? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time there because science has already discovered this. We've been talking about it, but it's crazy because your nervous system heals, your digestive system heals, and magic happens. Around 2 o'clock, when that cycle ends, a lot of people with excess heat in their bodies might wake up to pee, might wake up in a sweat. Uh, and then after 2 to 6, if you're a woman and you can still keep sleeping for those 4 hours, you don't want to wake up, your body really starts to regenerate new tissue. Growth hormone surges, and your body remoistens, refuels itself. It brings back the moisture that it loses through the day. And then men can wake up slightly earlier to do a spiritual practice, but women want to be sleeping till 6 because our bodies are juicier. We need that fuel, and then the cycle repeats itself. And I also want to say, as I say this is very intuitive, but we've forgotten it. All our ancestors lived like that, pretty much. Uh, I also want to remind people that if you look at the history of chronic disease, which really becomes the number one killer today because it spirals into other conditions as people grow older. Chronic conditions rose in the 1930s and 40s, 1940s really. And it's not a coincidence that it happened very soon, 10 years after electricity came into our homes.
Yeah, and I think that's the lack of emphasis people have on the link between, chronic illness and your circadian health and your deep restorative sleep and getting through the REM cycles. I think that's something we kind of shy away from because I read something recently saying, pre 1930s, people had the ability to sleep, 10, 11, 12 hours because you didn't have that light pushing melatonin later. So I think there's so much to be learned from that piece alone and the correlation between all the excess illness you're going to have because of lack of good quality sleep, all the glymphatic drainage, the repair happens at night. If we're going to bed 11, 12, 1, 2, we're missing so much repair. That's one really amazing point. And now we talk about heat so much and, people continuously talk about waking at 2 and 3 a.m. And you mentioned the heat rising in the body. So I want to talk about that and also then move on to why dryness is happening as well. But let's just start with the heat at 3 a.m. and then move to the dryness element.
Okay. So, heat and dry actually go together, right? So, the way I like to explain it, just to make it simpler, is to say that there are solar things we do, right? So, which are hot and dry. If you think about what the sun does on our planet, it comes out, it heats the planet, it dries the planet. That's what it does. It'll melt everything and it'll dry it out. So, if you are really out there in the sun, you'll see you start out by sweating, right? But if you stay long in the sun and it's a sharp sun, you're sunburned. And sunburn is dry. So after all the moisture is drained, there's a dryness. And that's the word, the dehydration is hot and dry. Now, our lifestyles have become hot and dry, right? So if you think of stress, it's hot and dry. If you think of caffeine, it's hot and dry. If you think of overworking, it's hot and dry. Overworking out is hot and dry. Excessive fasting and depriving ourselves of food and good fats, so drying. Staying up, if you've stayed up for a long day, you've talked a lot, you've been overstimulated, you can feel the dryness in your throat, in your eyes, in your ears. So we're really moving towards that solar lifestyle. And I'm not surprised that we're so inflamed inside. Global warming outside and inflammation inside, no surprise at all. It's the same thing, macro, micro, it's a replication of what is happening. So we're really going into that lifestyle. And I always say, right, like this heat will create dryness. And drying is dying. If you look at how everything, when it comes to its demise, you look at a fruit, right? It's nice, ripe, plump. And when it starts to decay, if you've not eaten that fruit, it's going to shrivel up and dry. If you leave a fruit on your counter for like 3 months and you go out, first it's going to dry and then it's going to get mold. But first it's just going to really shrivel up. You look at the transition from summer to autumn. It's the drying of the leaves. Here I live in New York. Everything dries out. It all falls. Look at our human bodies. When we hit menopause, we dry out. right? And people feel the dryness in their skin, in the vaginal canal, in their eyes, in the hair. Everything is dried out, right? The nervous system feels dry. And then we kind of start our, gradual decline from there. So basically, drying is dying, and you don't want to do it prematurely. But everything that we're doing in our lives today, all the waking, all the stressing, all the depriving ourselves of good fats, the doing, no resting, is so wrong. And we're sucking away our juice earlier. And it also leads, I hate to say it, but I have to say it, it is also leads to infertility. If you think about fertile and you think about fertile land, if you just, you may not know anything about farming or botany, but if you think about fertile land, even like my 13-year-old will be like, "Oh, mom, this soil is so dry. How can you grow something on this soil?" When your bodies are dry, how can you grow? Like eggs are always laid in moist places. They survive in moist places. And our bodies have become so hot, so dry that we're just working towards it. And I do want to say, because here I'm giving a lot of red flags to people, what I want to say is that the shift back is not as hard as you think. You don't have to go all the way, you don't have to dial it all the way overnight, right? Because your body does adapt a little bit, even to poor behaviors. But you want to gradually and very lovingly. I'm not asking anyone to do more. I'm asking them to do less. When you actually do this systematically, it starts to feel, it may sound overwhelming now, but all the people that I have worked with, they're like, oh my God, our life has become easier, more joyful, and more expansive.
And I think what you're saying, and when I think about when we talk so much about dryness, and as you say, we all think, oh, it's just the estrogen fluctuation, and we put very scientific words on it. But when we look at lifestyle, what happened is, the stress load got higher, your tolerance got less because progesterone dropped. So how are we going to bring back in, more, I don't know, moisture is probably the right word, but is, slowing down, resting, eating the healthy fats, the nourishing food, getting your deep restorative sleep. It's not overly complex things, but it's just like you said, living in alignment. When we live out of alignment, I think that's why it all comes to a head when we reach perimenopause years, because the body is like so dry because we've lived at such a speed. We haven't been nourishing the body. We haven't been getting adequate sleep. So it's no wonder we talk so much about, the vaginal dryness and the itchy skin, the itchy ears, the hair drying out. We always talk about dry, dry, dry when it's about perimenopause and menopause. And that's really interesting to think. We don't actually have to so early, people in their mid to late 30s are experiencing this. We can obviously bring more of the moisture back into your life as such by living in rhythm. So I think that's amazing to hear that, kind of going back to basics.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Just living back in rhythm keeps us juicy. And you know what? You talked about estrogen, right? What is estrogen? Estrogen is what keeps us, it's a recovery hormone, right? Like if you, so it is the juicy, it's what keeps us juicy. It's what allows us to have breasts, all the things that need to grow, soft organs that need to grow in our body through the monthly cycle, your endometrial life. That's all a result of estrogen. And testosterone is very hot and dry. A sperm cannot even live a man's sperm cannot even live inside a man's body. It has to be in his testicles, outside his scrotum, outside his body. So a woman's body, because it's juicy, we can host that sperm inside our bodies that a man cannot host inside his body.
Yeah.
So we are meant to be this kind of more moist beings than men. Women, women are lunar. If you think of the word lunar, you'll always think of a woman.
Always, yes. And I had a question actually recently, and a woman asked, how am I supposed to live cyclically if I have no cycle? And again, it goes back to living in the lunar cycle and just cyclically living, that everything isn't the same every day. We're cycling with our energy, with our appetite. Everything is cyclical. So I think that's really interesting. We don't necessarily start to live like a man when we have no cycle. We still live
Yeah. Oh.
with a different
Oh.
cycle.
Oh, absolutely. It's a that, you know what, if you don't mind, I want to take a moment to address this because this is such a conversation these days in my circles that, I mean, I'm assuming this is a woman who is post-menopause.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So a post-menopause is like your second life, right? Because it's a whole new body that you have and it's a whole new time of life, a whole new phase. But one of the things that happens is as women, we still need juice. And our juice is not coming from our estrogen. The juice comes from community. Women have this ability to actually hang out with other women and let that be a replenishing experience. Suddenly, women in their 50s and 60s, they drop judgment. In our 40s, we're very careful about our time. In our 30s, who are you spending it with? What are you learning? Suddenly, 55, 60, they drop judgment. You can hang out with anybody, a neighbor, anybody. And it's like, it's the community aspect that really refuels us and juices us, because for the first 50 years of her life, a woman is living the biologically we're designed, unfortunately, to live for others. But from 0 to 13, we are developing this nurturing role and sensitivity, and then we get our periods, and then you're able to reproduce. And even if those who are not having children, your nature, where just biochemically, our nature, hormonally, is our nature, is that we become the nurturers and caregivers. And then you're out of your mating, your nesting, your dating, everything, you're out of it in the traditional manner. So after 50s, you can enjoy true friendships and community, and that becomes your refueling.
Well, that's very interesting to think of it like that. And also how much our lives changed around COVID when the community got pulled away, and how much that changed us physiologically, because you're not. And I think there's a certain cultural thing that's happened where the isolation has caused so much more implications than we know about. Like, just not. And I think there's been this kind of idea of like, oh, you're not allowed gossip, or you're not allowed say anything out of turn with your girlfriends. But actually, when you're around your community and your group, it's when you speak the truth, you're totally honest, and you're completely yourself, because then there's a removal of shame. There's like, it's so relaxing to be heard. There's so much to be said for that. But fostering community is a whole part of health that we don't really associate with health.
Yeah, and it is so important. And I always, one thing that I'm learning as I'm coming to my mid 40s is this, that there's close friends and their community, and they can be different. Okay. Because close friends, you need to love your close friends. You need to be vulnerable with your close friends. You want to share everything with your close friends. With your community, you just need to like your community. But your community are people that you see every day. Like, you can walk somebody's dog. They're there in sickness. They're in health. They're there in wellness. So you don't, many people are like, oh, I don't like people where I live. No, you don't need, or like you don't have to be in love with your community. You just have to like them. But they become everyday people. They're in your ecosystem, and they can be your neighbors. They can be people in your building. They can be just people who are close
Yeah.
by. See, essentially has to be people that are around you a lot. So, when you make that distinction, it also takes the burden off that, oh, I have to love everybody in my circle. You don't
Yeah.
have. You want to love your close friends. They could be like, my best friend lives in Denver. Completely okay. I can talk to her from New York, Denver, but she's not in my community. I'm not seeing her every day in
Yeah.
that way. So it's important to make that distinction, especially we get in our 40s, because we are very soon, when we get out of our nesting phases and we get out of the traditional dating meeting, that's really what counts the most.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting as well when you touched on community is almost like mental rest, because when I think of community, I think someone always has my back if I need something. I don't know these people very well, but I know if I'm in crisis, they're there. So that for me is mental rest. When you're on your own and isolated, you always have this real dysregulation at the back of your mind that if you mess up, there's no one to pick up the pieces. So when I moved back to Ireland during COVID, and I moved back to my hometown, my parents, my friends were around, it was like the biggest weight was lifted off my shoulders. I didn't even particularly know anyone in the community anymore, but it was just going back to knowing there's people there that you see every few days. Hello, did you get my post? It's just such a relaxing thing to know that there's other people there for you when you're in need.
Listen, thank you for saying it. Like, thank you for saying that. I think it is so important to actually sit and absorb that, for anybody who's listening, that it is, we forget that how much of stress regulation happens by just having a community.
Oh, it's actually amazing when you really think of it. Even now, I'm in a new housing area the last year. I don't really know any of my neighbours, but again, I feel safe because I'm like, there's people around here that if I really need something, it's there. But also realizing like you have to be a villager to have a village. So they have to think the same about me. I have to still have that energy that I'm open to them knocking on my door. And that's something different in itself. Like you do have to be there and for them to be there. And I think that's a big thing we kind of forget.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It's so funny, Rebecca. It's the second time I've heard that what you just said, the saying, in 2 weeks. And it's
Okay.
hit me. Like last week, I was listening to a podcast, Lewis House, and I heard and I heard someone say this. I have been repeating it to myself all week that you
Yeah.
need to be a villager to have a village, because in New York you can very quickly not be a villager. But and thank you for saying that.
I actually think that's where I heard that phrase because it's been in my mind so much since
No
I
way.
heard it. Yeah, it's the same podcast because I remember I was like, that's exactly what I've been trying to articulate for so long because I couldn't
That's
fully
crazy.
put it into words.
It's aligned. We're like somewhere we're aligned, because it's the same thing. It's been in my mind so much.
I actually made a
Actually, my
newsletter about it a few weeks ago because I thought to myself, so much people are like, what's the missing piece of health? Like, what is going on? Why am I doing everything, on paper right, but what am I missing? And I was trying to think, it is that community aspect. It is living with our natural rhythms. There's lots of things that are like outside the scope of health that we don't see it in health, but Ayurvedic medicine does encapsulate it very well because it's all about every single piece of the
yeah,
puzzle, not just the most obvious, your five pillars of health.
yeah,
If we just look at nutrition, sleep, and all the other, generic pillars, we're missing all the little nuances that really pull the
yeah,
lever of health.
yeah,
So I think
yeah.
it's just really
That,
amazing to
sometimes
acknowledge.
that's going back into the rhythms, and then everything else follows. Like your sleep will follow,
Mhm.
your exercise will follow. Like you'll just know what to do. It'll just,
Yeah.
you don't have to have like these five, like the prescriptions out there. And then one more thing I'll say about that. I always like to say like Ayurveda versus Ayurvedic medicine, and I know that everybody says Ayurvedic medicine, but I'll tell you, because medicine limits its scope, and that's not
Yeah.
like it's just really how you live, how you eat, how you breathe, how you interact with people. It's all of it.
It's lifestyle. It's really is, yeah, Ayurveda lifestyle. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of us associate, when we talk about um, Ayurveda in general, we think, oh, do you have to label yourself as Pitta or Vata? And understanding that, I think there's a big association with that, and people don't really understand it. So I don't think they realize that it's such an all-encompassing thing.
It is, it is. And like I like to say that we're always looking at disease, but what I like to say, and that's the North Star that I have, that I work with, is the optimum climate inside, instead of giving us ourselves a label. So
Mm.
like I have this a concept called the inner climate method, where we are like, okay, this is the optimum climate. And now let me see if I'm deviated from this place.
Yes.
Like, rather than trying to identify and diagnose ourselves with a dosha that we don't understand and then don't even know where to go from there.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think so much people are disconnected that they're like, Ayurveda is all about bringing people back to trusting their body. So some people are so disconnected that what we're saying today is actually quite different because it is a very known thing on social media that you eat your cold Greek yogurt, berries, your smoothie in the morning. People really say that that's the best thing you can do. The same with a personal trainer saying you can eat your meals at any time you want as long as you hit your calories, which obviously is completely illogical when you think about how the body works and the times like insulin works, for example. So
Mhm.
just deeply understand that because I would say actually a lot of people even listening to this or in general really don't understand that because we are told a narrative of, just hit your calories. Everything else doesn't matter. Get lean. It's as simple as the nutrition or saying, you really need to optimize your sleep. And they're just saying, take the supplement. It's like crazy to think because nothing is in isolation. Everything is together. So I think that's a really good way to look at it and understand the nervous system piece as well and the rhythm is the foundation of all that and everything you talk about it's like slowing down to speed up. Less is more. We don't need complexity. We want to learn how to rest, to slow down, and that seems to be everything I've read about it when I was preparing for this. It seems
Yes,
to have really that's the core. We're not
yes.
trying to complicate things.
Thanks. We're not. We're
we're,
not.
we're trying to go back to actually exactly how we're meant to live. And because it's been around for so long, it's how we've lived and
Yeah.
how we lived innately like animals, the same thing. And you're just trying to bring back all that and support it. Like so much of the drinks we associate with it, even like warm milks, it's all to go back to the principle you said of giving the body what it needs for digestion, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like sometimes people will question, oh, but nature is supposed to be raw, like everything in nature is raw. And then I say, I don't know, we talked about this or not, but like because I like to go back to the principles, I'm like, just do a little history of what happened when we started using fire to cook our food.
Yeah.
Like people Google it, like nothing to do with Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is the science of life, so it's universal and all principles come under Ayurveda. But anyways, you'll see a historian who did a lot of research and everybody else agrees is that when we started cooking our foods is when we got on our feet, is when we developed an intellect, is when we became humans. We were not even humans till we started cooking our foods,
Yeah.
because our gut bacteria changed and our brains became different. So it's like, yeah. So when, sometimes people are like, oh, but nature exists raw. All other animals eat raw foods. That's why they're animals.
That's very interesting because there is such a push for, raw diets. And I'd love your take on that because it's
Yeah.
obviously the opposite of
Yeah.
what the principles are.
Yeah, absolutely, Rebecca. So the push for raw diets is a very new thing. When we went into industrialization and we became all processed foods and junk foods, and we're like, oh my God, like there was such a yearning to get fresh back. And we don't understand that the fresh, it doesn't mean raw. In fact, if you look at any of the blue zones where people live for over 100 years in a very healthful manner, they did not eat their foods raw. They ate beans and they had plantains and they cooked their foods. So it's like, it's a very new fact. I mean, can you imagine being on an island which has amazing produce, like the best fruits, but and you're eating those bananas and papayas and berries, but really feeling grounded and nourished after 5, 7, 10 days, you're going to want that warmth. It's really what has made us humans. We have evolved. I suspect that if chimpanzees and apes started eating cooked foods, at some point they would start having human like tendencies after a million years, but it will happen. It took us like about, I think, 300,000 years to do this. 300,000 years ago, we were a different species. And a lot before that, we started using fire. And then that's what led to this gradual shift for how we become who we are today. So raw foods, and there are certain traditions and cultures that did raw foods mindfully, right? If you look at the Greek diet, it was usually cucumbers and tomatoes and a little, but always with olive oil and vinegar. And what oil and vinegar do together, they create slight fermentation. And fermentation it's not a direct form of cooking, but is a form of activation of life, of bacteria in that food substance. And when you're activating it, either through cooking, either through fermenting, either through baking, some form of applying heat in it, you know, the form changes of the food and the form changes of the food, and then there may not be that much of a need to actually cook it. So if you do it, and if you do small portions and you do it, during lunchtime, not during dinner time when the sun is still high, because raw, now they're understanding, right? Oh my God, like caloric, like nutrient value is not determined by how much a food substance contains. Nutrient value is determined by nutrient assimilation. Nutrient assimilation is dependent on the bioavailability. And bioavailability is enhanced when things are cooked, they're spiced, the good fats are added. So I think science is also making a transition from that listen, just because the nutrient value of a certain broccoli, raw broccoli, is more than cooked broccoli, doesn't mean that that's going to be assimilated in your body and it's going to be bioavailable. So I have a lot of value for modern science, and I have a lot of compassion for modern science because they're evolving into this newer understanding every day, right? Versus something that we've seen that is time tested, that is logical, that science is today coming to. So the
Wow.
answer is clear.
That's so interesting to think of the bioavailability because for most people, they've only ever heard that word when it comes to protein. And they're thinking, oh, animal based proteins are the best because they're more bioavailable. But it's interesting when we look at food in general. And I remember the first time I really understood this. I was in my 20s and I was eating a lot of raw food. And I remember reading like it's best to cook the mushrooms and reading why that is, even just slightly steaming them. And then I started to understand that a little bit more. Okay, we want to digest this properly so we can use the nutrients. So what's the best way to do that? It obviously varies for different foods, but really thinking, how am I going to best digest this food? Is it in its raw form, or is it with, as you say, the vinegar and olive oil, or is it lightly cooking it, or is it cooking it more? Because even with a lot of foods that are difficult to digest, we obviously cook them more. And when we think about that, plus if your microbiome isn't in good condition and you don't have enough good gut bacteria and the different strains, it's doubly as hard. So it's like thinking, how can we make digestion easier process? We help the gut microbiome and we help it further by eating foods in the best form they can be digested.
Absolutely. And the first function of food, I say, is not even to nourish you. First function of food is not to give you nutrients. First function of food is to protect your gut bacteria
Yeah.
because they're really the workers inside. If the kitchen has no workers, what are you going to cook? So it's like they're the workers inside, they're the chefs inside our system. And eating a lot of raw foods messes up, creates gut dysbiosis. And today's science has recognized that, has understood that. When you cook the foods, imagine you're already doing half the work. You're activating the life processes in that food. The decay is much faster once you cook food, right? Now, that itself is indicative of the life. You've already taken it to this active live state. You've enlivened the foods. And now the breakdown process is much easier and it's going to be much lighter on your digestion and you're going to absorb it better. And all of those beautiful things are going to happen by doing. So it's like, I'm like, why would I want to cook my foods completely in my gut when I can activate them outside?
And what's the nuance of that, like the foods you would regularly eat? Which ones are you thinking, okay, that one I need to cook more or less of the stuff you would eat day to day?
So I would say that I think the foods themselves will tell you, like for example, potatoes will tell you that they need a
Yeah.
little bit fat, they need a little bit more spice, they need to be a little bit softer. So I think honestly, it's almost all foods. I never overcook foods. Nothing
Yeah.
gets overcooked. Everything till the point that it's warm, but before it becomes slimy. You see, when you
Yes.
overcook foods, either they become slimy or they burn or they become dehydrated and shrivel.
Mhm.
But that optimum inner climate, warm and moist, is where I like to stop.
That makes complete sense when you said that, because in Ireland it's very like it's a phrase that's always said, like, oh, you've overcooked that. Like it's your granny will always overboil the broccoli or overboil the potato. And it's interesting looking at that sweet spot, because as soon as you said that, I thought, okay, when I'm looking at an onion, I know how much that it needs to be cooked before it's overcooked. Same
Yeah,
with a piece of spinach. It
yeah,
just can be lightly steamed. You don't need to make
yeah,
it, like you say, slimy, because a
yeah.
lot of people do eat spinach when it's really cooked.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. So, again and again, we want to kind of start developing our own intelligence and our own trust. And that's why like these principles help, right? The principle of the circadian rhythm, so that even if a genius today, you so-called genius comes out and tells you, oh, best time to work out is 10 p.m. at night. But if you understand that that's not how nature works, you'll be like, rejecting your idea. Like nobody can tell me a smoothie in the morning. No matter, you can tell me that's this.
Yeah.
I know, like, hello, my body is cold. It's cold outside. And then I tell people, try it for 3 weeks. Like, try the warm thing for 3 weeks and tell me how you feel. And people are like, listen, my congestion is gone. My energies are more. I have better hunger for lunch, but I'm not putting on any weight. Like, I'm not putting on any excess weight. I'm not feeling sluggish. Like life changes. So I just
Yes.
tried for 3 weeks. 3 weeks is not going to hurt anything. And so once you know your principles, you become bulletproof. Like
Yeah.
nobody can sell anything to you.
I think it just came into my head there how significant it is. So much women feel cold all the time, regardless of the temperature. And I'm just thinking of all the different factors that can create that, from, the cold food in the morning, which a lot of people would have. And that's just very interesting, because we often think, the thyroid isn't working well and we associate that with cold hands and feet. And there's
Yeah.
obviously multiple factors. But I'm sure the way you live and the timings of your meals, the timing of your exercise, that all impacts the heat and the temperature of your body.
Yeah, and then also the hot and dryness that we just talked about. Basically, when your body becomes like this hot and dry, all your channels in the body, right? The carriers that are carrying blood, plasma, sweat, everything, they all kind of dry out a little bit. So think of a
Mm.
stream, which is kind of in the end of the summer, the stream is almost dehydrated. So the circulation in the extremities kind of becomes poor. And when the circulation in the extremities becomes poor, you see cold hands, cold feet, because you cannot even have your nice warm blood gushing to your extremities. And the
Mm.
practices we talked about in the earlier podcast, the warm oiling, etc., help. But basically, that's one of the things, that circulation is blocked for most people, and the
Mm.
bodies become dry, and a drier body will almost always create thyroid dysfunction.
Wow, that really, in my early 20s, I was really confused of why I was regularly cold. My skin was bone dry, and I had all these things that were, very connected to what we're saying, very connected to my thyroid not doing the job it should be doing, because I was living out of alignment. I wasn't getting the deep restorative sleep. I wasn't eating enough fat in my diet. Very interesting to put all them pieces together, that you're not just, people would say, I'm just a cold creature. It's a lot more to it than that, what's happening in the body.
Yes, absolutely. Nobody
Wow.
is a creature. We have warm blood and our bodies are meant to be warm. We have warm breath. We have warm
Wow.
breast,
Yeah.
milk, we have warm reproductive fluids. Nobody is meant to be cold.
That's so interesting. So, so interesting to think the amount of friends I have that are like, oh, I'm always cold.
Yeah. It's an imbalance. And it doesn't mean that you cannot treat it. So like really like one of the things I tell everybody, listen, my job is not to alarm you. My job is to take you to a place of joy and ease in your own body. And it's easier than what most people think.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point to wrap up on. And what are the simple ways that, say, a woman's listening to this and she's like, okay, I'm cold, I'm dry, I'm tired. How can she rebuild the trust in a practical way so that she can start just living in line with her rhythms?
Yeah. And the first thing that I'll tell everybody, the first thing you want to do is get as close to the circadian clock that we talked
Yeah.
about. And it means if you're sleeping at 2, start sleeping at 1:30, and then you move that to 1 and you move that to 12:30. Be very gentle with yourself because if it's going to stress you out and it's going to take away your flow, it's not going to lead to health. So I tell people just do everything, take it step by step and keep flowing with it. Do not
Mm.
let it cross the other side from flow to stress. Do not let it go from flow to stress. Right?
Yes.
When something starts to stress you, it's your indicator that I've gone too far with this. So you
Yeah.
want to do very slowly and slowly build on that scope of how much you can do, right? But the first thing you want to do is that. The second thing you want to do after the circadian clock or while you're doing it is just start thinking about warm and moist foods. Whether you're cooking your foods or eating something slightly fermented, if you're eating something raw, make sure it's in the daytime when the sun is active and your microbiome is more active. And then you can make sure you added good fats. Don't skimp on that. Don't skimp on the good fats. Move your body, but move your body in the morning and eat an
Mm.
early dinner. So I'm going to summarize it. Follow the clock to the best you can, working your way towards it. All foods keep them warm, including your beverages, very important. You don't want to refrigerate your insides. Refrigeration doesn't break down nothing. And then your metabolism is going to go for a toss. So keep your foods warm, keep your beverages warm as much as possible. Once in a while, you can indulge. Have a big lunch, have a light dinner, and move your body in the morning. And then
Mm.
if you can go back to that previous podcast and think about the oiling, if you want to do more, you do the oiling. And if you do just even these 5 things and you do them for 3 weeks, I will give you my life if you don't notice a difference. Because I've heard so many, Becca, I've had so many thousands of people writing to me that they are just following these principles from the book and they're like, I've not even done everything and I've just, so much has changed in my life.
Yeah. If I'm honest, it's completely opened up my eyes. Like if you were to listen to this podcast and the previous one we did together, you have such a deeper understanding of female health and you have
I
so many
so
practical steps to really move forward because even the changes I've made with the body oiling, the timing of my meals, because I've always been so interested in circadian health, especially female circadian health. And that's what it all comes back to, living in alignment. And even there's a diagram I always think of in my mind where it shows what time of the day different hormones are secreting.
yeah,
And I always think, wow, that's just such a simple way to explain when you're meant to eat, when you're meant to exercise, when you're meant to sleep. If you look at, just Google that diagram, hormone secretion clock, you will literally know everything you need. And nobody, like you said, will ever be able to tell you otherwise. Because you're like, I know my physiology. I
yeah,
understand how we're meant to live. And it's
yeah,
just very straightforward.
yeah.
I think we'll finish with the question of the one shifter principle you wish every woman understood. So you could support the body more, I suppose.
More being, less doing.
I love that. Yeah.
Honestly, yeah. And being is not sitting on your couch and doom scrolling, but being could just mean relaxing and looking outside, sitting with your cup of tea, noticing the rain or the sun or the wind or the flowers, but being, just
Yeah.
being. So I think being is healing.
Yeah, I experienced that a lot. 2 weeks ago, I was on a ski trip for the week and I just had mental rest the whole week when I skied. And I realized after that's how we're meant to live. We're meant
So
to have complete mental breaks regularly in the day. But I realized I wasn't getting that when I came back. So it made me make some changes that I was like relearning the skill of rest, relaxation, just listening to the birds on the walk, when I have a place now at home, just in a corner where I can just rest, where I have my book. And I was like, that's what we need, them little moments of complete simplicity in order to help your health. But I think after this conversation, a lot of people want to read your book. I know it's an absolute gold mine. I like blown away by it. So I'd love to hear that, where they can find it, and also where they can find you on social media, because I love your social media videos.
Thank you so much, Becca. So my book is called Your Body Already Knows, and you can find it on Amazon, everywhere, I think, in the world. I know UK for sure. You can find it in
Yeah.
other leading websites and some bookstores. And then online, you can find my Instagram on my underscore Ayurvedic underscore life.
Yes.
Uh,
Fantastic.
or you just look for my name, Nidhi Pandya Ayurveda, and hopefully you'll find me.
Yeah. No, I can't thank you enough for this conversation. I think it was so amazing. I hope so much people listen to this. No doubt they will. And I'm really looking forward to reading the book again.
Thank you so
So
much
thanks
for
so much.
yes, take care.
Wow, the 2 episodes I recorded with Nidhi have led me to making so many changes, from nutrition to body oiling and everything in between. I found them just amazing. So her book is Your Body Already Knows, and you can find her on Instagram at underscore Ayurvedic underscore life. And if that 6-part rhythm made sense to you, but you're sitting there thinking, okay, but how do I actually do this? How do I actually put this in real life? That's exactly what I do in my Rebalance membership. Every month we take one piece of the nervous system puzzle, we'll say, like circadian health, cortisol, blood sugar, gut health. And we have one small daily action already decided for you, so you're not left there trying to figure it out for yourself. It's the same principle as Nidhi's talking about, less doing and more consistency. So if that sounds like it's going to be helpful to you, please have a look at the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.